Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Team Venom Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Rory Bailey, and this week's episode is going to be another From the Vault episode, and it's probably, for me, it's one of the shortest ones that there'll be, but for me, it was the most important one of these interviews that we've ever done. So, essentially, back in 2014, I'd started doing a lot of interviews, and for context, everything was originally done with the intention of being put out for magazines and website columns, that sort of thing. And initially, we were doing bits and bobs for I think it was RJR Publishing or something like that. The name was, and they did a series of magazines called Retro. Oh, what was it called? I don't know, Retro something or other, but their logo was like a giant R. And they also had a British wrestling magazine called Resurrection British Wrestling. They initially did a load of columns on myself because I used to wrestle back in, I think this was around about 2012 they were putting these columns out. And for the very first one, I what got me into wrestling, and what got me into wrestling was a VHS tape that I had when I was younger, and that was the 1993 Royal Rumble tape. And the main event for that, outside of the Rumble match itself, was Razor Ramon challenging for the WWF Championship against Bret the Hitman Hart. And so in this first column that I'd had, I told them that, and told any of the readers that were reading and everything, that Bret the Hitman Hart is the reason that I got into wrestling. And that's true. Bret Hart's my all-time favourite wrestler. Love Bret Hart. That tape was one of the first VHSs that I owned, and obviously it was back in 93. I think the next VHS tape I owned was Survivor Series 96, which was Bret Hart and Stone Cold. Obviously I'd seen wrestling in between that as well, but these were the ones that the proper full shows that I'd owned. I'd had a few of the old Coliseum home video things as well, where it was like a Hulk Hogan Real America and that sort of thing. But the first couple of shows I had was Royal Rumble 93 and Survivor Series 96, and back in the 90s, they were really hard to come by, so those tapes got watched to death. So, like, I can describe both of those Bret Hart matches in my sleep. And I can remember watching Wrestling with Shadows on Channel 5 when that came out. So that would have been, 97, 98 sort of time. But yeah, Bret Hart's my all-time favourite wrestler, and he's the reason that I wanted to get into wrestling. My first ever match I won with a sharpshooter, because of course. It was awesome. So going into this, obviously you'll have seen the title of this week's episode. Going into this, I'd only done one interview with someone, and that was with MVP, and MVP was awesome. And then I arranged an interview with Too Cool and Rikishi, and also an interview with Bret the Hitman Hart. And Bret Hart was doing a tour of the UK with MDA Promotions, and they were doing these evening with events, and I genuinely, I mean, I can remember this really well because it was quite funny. I saw an advert for it in one of my local taxi ranks of all places. I rang up the number on it. I left a message to see if there was any chance of being able to blag an interview, basically. And I think I left it a few weeks, tried again, left a message again. Didn't hear anything, and then a couple of weeks before the show, I got a phone call out of the blue from a number that I didn't recognise, and it was from a guy called Matt Ward, I think his name was, and that was the guy who was running MDA Promotions at the time. He also later gave us an interview with Eric Bischoff, which was all absolutely amazing, and I can remember at the time my then girlfriend laughing at me because I literally got off the phone with the news of, oh yeah, you can interview Bret the Hitman Hart, and because it was such a big deal to me, I genuinely had like emotional happy tears, and yeah, my then girlfriend just laughed her head off at that because she had no interest in wrestling, which is why she's an ex. But yeah, so I've waffled for 5 minutes about this, but it's probably the most important occurrence in wrestling that I had, in that I've interviewed loads and loads of people over the years, loads for mainly for print, which is why these audio things from the vault aren't really presented in a way that would be ideal for podcasts or anything like that, because they are, again, intended for print, or they were intended for print. But this was, absolutely the most important one and the most meaningful one, because Bret Hart is my all-time favourite, and this was just awesome. So anyway, without further ado, here's an interview with Bret the Hitman Hart. Enjoy.
And you've always been very open with your fans, what with your book, the WWE DVD sets, the Wrestling with Shadows documentary. But what made you want to go one step further and host a string of Q&A fan interaction sessions?
Well, I just think because the people, they like going back to the memories like I do. I think for a lot of fans, like just sort of reliving some of what was really going on behind the scenes. Is, even though they've read my book, and most of the time they're hearing stuff that I've already told before, but every night's different. I talk about a lot of different things. And, it's kind of a fun experience for me. I get to relive a lot of stuff. And sometimes the conversation goes a lot of different directions. Like they'll make me recall something that I wouldn't have normally thought about. So it's a fun experience, especially when you got such good fans. You got really knowledgeable fans that are sort of very, very up on my career, and a lot of the little details that went with it. And it's fun to kind of explore all the past. And there's been a lot of things that happened, even since I've retired that are interesting for fans. Things that have happened since I finished. But I think I'm always just happy to come back and touch baseball with my fans here. I think England's clearly I got the best fans in the world over here.
Okay, thank you. During the 1980s, both yourself and Anvil were considered the biggest tag team and the best tag team in the WWF. And then in the beginning of the 90s, you were viewed as the best wrestler in the company. How did it feel to be truly known as the best there is at the time?
Well, I think I owe a lot to the guys that enabled me to become the real big superstar that I became. And it starts with Roddy Piper and Mr. Perfect were probably the first two guys to really sort of bow and step and let me go ahead of them and do what they could to help me. Macho Man was another one. There's a lot of guys that endorsed me as a world champion, and even Ric Flair, he gave me a chance to be the champion. And a lot of guys helped build me from there, prepare me for that big launch, and I'm always grateful for that.
Following on from that, you had many highly memorable feuds with the likes of Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, British Bulldog, Roddy Piper, Mr. Perfect, your brother Owen, The Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Out of all your feuds, which one was your favourite and why?
I think, well, it's hard to say. I can't say I had a feud with Undertaker, but I had some great... I love the SummerSlam and some of the pay-per-view matches that I had with him. Steve Austin, I guess, would probably have to be the best feud I had. Shawn, in a way, was the best feud because as up and down as our story was, we had some great stories in the ring. But if you had to zero down to name one, I'd have to say Owen, just because of not necessarily because of the storyline. The storyline was a good storyline, but I really loved the matches we had. I know really the only match you really have to grade us on anymore was the WrestleMania 10, which was a really great match. But when you watch that, you have to bear in mind that was the first time we really ever wrestled. And I'd say the matches that I had on the Heart Attack tour over here in the UK a few days, actually the next couple of days, were better matches. They were more tight, the timing was just a little bit better. Owen and I had some absolutely 5-star matches here right after WrestleMania 10, and in the next 6 months, I'm sure back here in the UK and Germany and places like that, even in my own hometown in Calgary, I remember we had just amazing matches that nobody ever filmed and nobody captured on video or tape.
You famously fell out with the WWF in 1997 and finally returned some 13 years later to one of the loudest ovations that I've heard in the WWE in recent years. What was it like going back there to such a brilliant reaction?
Well, it was maybe one of my greatest victories and one of my greatest moments. I always felt like when I came back and did that thing a couple of years ago with Vince McMahon that it was, I understood as well as anyone maybe that I was not the excellence of execution, the technical wrestler that I was in the 90s. And, I know that I probably disappointed people with the fact that it wasn't a great technical or wrestling type of match. But the truth of the matter is that after my stroke, just the thought of standing on the ramp and walking down that ramp towards the ring was one of my hugest victories I ever had in my lifetime.
There's one more, guys.
One more. Okay. You've held every title currently available in the WWE. Back when it was the WWF, you held the IC, Tag and World titles, and then when you returned, you beat The Miz for the US title. Which title win was the most meaningful, and why?
I'd have to say the first one is always the one that will always mean the most. The fifth one was a big one, probably the best actual match I had is in winning the title. Mind you, the Kevin Nash match at WrestleMania or whatever, the Survivor Series when I won it the third time was a brilliant match too. I really had, when I won the title, with the exception of probably the Yoko match at WrestleMania 10, which was probably a 4 out of 10 match, but all the rest, including the Final Four, were great matches. I love all of them. They all got different memories, and wish I could go back and relive them all.